A man becomes replaceable the moment his presence stops creating tension. Inspired by Machiavelli. A researcher decided to do something very few people would ever dare to do. He spent months interviewing more than 400 sex workers, not driven by curiosity, not driven by scandal. He was driven by a silent obsession to understand what makes a man lose value in a woman's eyes. And what he discovered was far more unsettling than he expected. Most men believe attraction is lost because of one obvious mistake. A wrong message, a bad date, a poorly chosen sentence. But that's not how it happens. Loss of value does not arrive with noise. It arrives quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. Until one day, she looks at you differently, and you have no idea why. Here is the brutal truth. It does not matter how much emotional effort you invest. It does not matter how hard you try to please her. It does not matter how present, supportive, or attentive you are. If you send the wrong signals, desire shuts off. Not slowly, instantly. And the most painful part? Often not even she can explain it. Her body reacts before her mind understands. Machiavelli would have understood this immediately. Because to him, power is not lost through dramatic defeats, but through tiny behaviors that quietly reveal weakness. And the moment a man starts acting from need, from fear of losing, he has already begun to lose. This video is not for the man who wants approval, it is for the man who wants understanding. Because female desire, like political power, is not fair, not logical, it is biological. And anyone who ignores its invisible rules will be dismissed without explanation. Today, I am not going to tell you how to make a woman like you. I am going to show you the behaviors that quietly destroy your value, even when you believe you are doing everything right. Because the real enemy is not your looks, not your money, not your status. The enemy is what you communicate without realizing it. And if you are willing to face the truth without comfort or excuses, by the end of this video, you will understand something very few men ever do: how value is lost, and how to never hand it away. Most men lose value long before rejection ever happens. They lose it in small gestures, in poorly handled silence, in microactions that reveal anxiety. They lose it when they stop being a stimulus and become an emotional observer. One of the most common mistakes is early emotional overexposure. Showing too much interest too fast signals a lack of options. At a biological level, attraction does not respond to abundance. It responds to selectiveness, to restraint, to what feels self-directed. Another silent mistake is being too available. Replying instantly, canceling plans to see her, reshaping your life around her schedule. All of this sends one subconscious message: I have nothing more important than you. And while that may sound romantic, it actually lowers perceived value, because it communicates a lack of personal direction. And the most damaging mistake of all is constantly seeking reassurance. Asking if she likes you. Fishing for validation. Fearing the loss of her attention. That anxious energy is never invisible. It is felt. And when your energy says, I need you to choose me, desire collapses. This is where Machiavelli enters again. Power is never requested, it is projected. And when a man operates from insecurity, every word he speaks loses weight. Because value is not communicated through explanations. It is communicated through presence, through composure, through internal control. Loss of value rarely shows up as direct rejection. More often, she becomes distant. She laughs less. She replies slower. Small shifts you can't quite explain, but they destabilize you. And then comes the fatal mistake. You try to compensate. More messages, more effort, more attention. But all that effort proves one thing. You are trying to recover something that is already fading. She doesn't need to say it. She usually never will. Her tone, her body language, her energy are already communicating everything. Here is the core truth. Attraction is not democratic. You cannot negotiate it. You cannot argue your way into it. You can only understand what activates it and what destroys it. What activates it is simple: centered energy, emotional independence, internal stability. What destroys it is just as simple: neediness, anxiety, dependence, lack of inner structure. This is not about acting tough. It is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about real internal control. Because the moment you lose your center, you lose leverage. And most men don't even realize it's happening. They act from fear without naming it. They act from need without admitting it. And step by step, they hand away their value. Has this ever happened to you? A woman is interested at first, and then suddenly she goes cold. No clear reason, no explanation. It was never random. At some point, you sent signals that changed how she perceived you. That is the power of nonverbal communication. Tone of voice, posture, eye contact, an insecure laugh. Her emotional brain reads it instantly. The man who constantly adapts himself to her reactions stops being a source of desire and becomes a functional presence. Comfort without spark. She may appreciate you, trust you, talk to you for hours, and still never feel attraction. Not because connection is missing, but because magnetism is gone. Machiavelli once implied that those who seek affection without authority end up ignored. This is not about creating fear. It is about projecting respect, because respect always comes before desire. And once you understand that, you are already ahead of most men. Value is not taken from you. It is surrendered. And the moment you stop surrendering it, everything changes. For several months, a social psychologist conducted one of the most uncomfortable studies ever recorded. He interviewed and observed more than 400 escorts, not to judge them, not to sensationalize their work, but to understand how attraction shifts based on the energy men bring with them. Even in a transactional environment, perception of value still operates. The service was the same, the conditions were the same, but the response was not. Some men were treated differently, not because they were richer, not because they were better looking, but because they carried themselves differently. They projected calm authority, contained confidence, masculine restraint, no explanations, no need to impress, just presence. And that invisible language changed everything. Women who were trained to interact with hundreds of men without emotional involvement reported something unexpected. They felt more attracted, more open, and even more respectful toward men who did not come seeking validation but came projecting control. In some cases, they even admitted feeling nervous around certain men, not out of fear, but because of the intensity of their presence. And the most fascinating part is that these reactions were not rational. They were visceral, automatic, instant. When the recorded sessions were later analyzed, a clear pattern emerged. Men did not lose value because of what they said, but because of what they communicated without speaking. Nervous movements, collapsed posture, people-pleasing behavior, self-deprecating jokes, all of it created a low-value perception, even in a paid setting. One detail stopped the researchers cold. Some sex workers admitted that although they performed interest with everyone, they only genuinely felt it with certain men. And those men were not always the most attractive, not the richest, not the most talkative, they were the most centered. So what did these standout men have in common? They did not seek approval, they did not display anxiety, they maintained eye contact without trying to overpower. They moved slowly, calmly, never rushed. They behaved as if their presence alone was already sufficient. And this is where Machiavelli enters. He would have said, "He who controls perception controls the interaction." These men were not asking, they were positioned. Their value was not advertised, it was felt. They did not explain who they were. They did not try to convince. They were the argument. And the most interesting part, many of them were not even aware of it. They were not performing a role, they were simply that way. They had developed a strong internal structure, a core that did not require validation to exist. And even in the most artificial environment of desire, that core triggered the same biological responses. Because a woman's body never fully disconnects, not even when intimacy is transactional. The body always responds to signals. The study also revealed something deeply uncomfortable. The men who tried the hardest to please were the men who generated the least desire. The more effort they put into being nice, talkative, complimentary, the less impact they had. And this confirms one of the hardest truths a man can face. Female desire does not reward emotional effort. It responds to perceived authority. One testimony captured everything. There are clients who treat me like a queen, but I struggle to stay interested. And there are others who barely speak, yet they make me feel observed, emotionally exposed, as if they can read me. That is not coincidence. That is biology responding to signals. And what works on women trained to detach from desire works even more strongly on ordinary women. Because if even in an environment where attraction should be artificial, these signals still penetrate, imagine what happens in real relationships. This experiment makes one thing clear. Male value is not defined by context. It is projected from the core. You can have money. You can have looks. But if your energy communicates insecurity, it is felt. And if your energy communicates quiet authority, that is felt too. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding. Understanding how posture, rhythm, and emotional control activate responses in the female mind that even she cannot logically explain. When a woman says, "There's something about him, I don't know what it is, but I'm drawn to him," she is describing this. Machiavelli did not write about dating. He did not write about attraction. He wrote about rulers, about power, about perception. But when his principles are applied to desire, they become precise. Because Machiavelli understood something most men still ignore. Power is not what you possess. Power is what you project. In The Prince, he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both." This does not mean cruelty. It means inner structure. It means being perceived as someone who does not collapse under external judgment. And in the female psyche, that perception translates into desire. A woman may love the man she admires, but she desires the man she respects. And respect is not born from compliments, not from excessive softness. It is born from contained energy, from self-control, from the conviction of a man who moves through the world without asking permission to exist. Machiavelli observed that the most respected leaders were not the nicest ones. They were the most emotionally stable, the ones who did not react with anxiety, the ones who kept their center even in chaos. And is that not the most magnetic quality a man can possess? In the realm of desire, this is law. A woman reacts to how you react to the world. If she senses that you are easily shaken, that her words control your emotional state, that your stability depends on her approval, it does not matter how attractive you are. Your value drops. Machiavelli would say the most effective power is the power that does not need to be displayed. It is perceived, it radiates, it requires no explanation. And that is exactly what happens with men who trigger desire without speaking. Their presence alone is already a statement. Now ask yourself this. Why does this Machiavellian framework align so deeply with female desire? Because attraction is not a surface emotion. It is an evolutionary response to internal leadership. A woman does not consciously search for strength. Her biology detects it in milliseconds. She feels it in your posture, in your voice, in your rhythm. And that feeling cannot be manufactured with lines or techniques. It is built through perceived value. Machiavelli explained it like this. Men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone can see, but few can truly touch. Translated into desire. A woman does not need to know you deeply to decide if she desires you. She only needs to perceive something she cannot fully explain. Presence, energy, direction. And that perception is not created by clothes, not by money. It is created by your internal state. Here is where most men fail. They try to build attraction through logic, through explanations, through emotional overinvestment. But female desire is not born in the rational mind. It is born in the body, in the limbic system. And that system does not respond to effort. It responds to signals. It does not respond to arguments. It responds to signals. That is why, if Machiavelli were alive today, he would not write dating books. He would write manuals on perception, on body language, on energetic positioning. Because for him, what mattered most was not being good, but appearing valuable. Not through deception, but through strategy. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding how human perception works. Because even if you are an honest man, hardworking, generous, if you do not project presence, authority, and direction, her body will not register you as desirable. She may see you as safe, she may see you as reliable, but not as magnetic. Here is another key Machiavellian principle. Human nature is ungrateful. People lean more toward the one who imposes than the one who pleads. Applied to attraction, the more you beg, the less you provoke. The more you try to please, the deeper you sink. The more you depend on her attention, the less attention you command. Machiavelli also said, "Men offend sooner the one they love than the one they fear." Uncomfortable, but true. Attraction collapses the moment she perceives that she can emotionally control you, that your stability depends on her. And in that moment, without realizing it, you stop being a challenge and become an emotional utility. Do you see it? Everything Machiavelli taught about power applies to attraction because attraction is a game of hierarchy, of positioning, of silent influence. And if you don't understand how it works, you end up competing with nice guy gestures while she feels drawn to the man who isn't trying to impress her at all. The Machiavellian man is not cruel. He is not abusive. He is the man who does not need validation to act. He inspires respect without forcing it. He moves with conviction so strong that others follow even when they don't know why. And in the world of attraction, that is an advantage few understand and almost no one masters. Before you say your first word, you have already been evaluated, not by what you think, not by what you plan to say, but by something older, more direct, more honest, your non-verbal language. A woman's body, just like yours, has evolved over thousands of years to read signals. It does not need logic. It does not need explanation. In milliseconds, it decides whether you are a high-value man or a man who can be overlooked. That judgment happens before you open your mouth. And here is the unsettling part. You do not fully control it, because your body does not communicate what you want. It communicates what you believe. That is the hidden language of attraction. Machiavelli would understand this perfectly, because for him, perception was everything. And body language is pure perception. This is not about being handsome. It is about what your body communicates in silence. Slouched posture, nervous, rushed movements, avoiding eye contact, speaking too quickly, taking up little space, excessive gestures, laughing too much. All of this signals insecurity. You can say intelligent things. You can try to sound confident, but if your body says otherwise, she will feel it instantly. On the other side, upright posture, slow breathing, calm eye contact, controlled use of space, economy of movement, comfort with silence. These communicate something that cannot be faked for long: internal strength. Attraction responds to these signals not because they are trends, but because deep biology reads them as signs of stability, presence, and leadership. In other words, you are not attracting. You are being assessed, often without knowing it. And the most brutal truth, she is not choosing consciously. Her body reacts before her mind explains. That is why some men create intrigue without speaking, while others, after trying everything, create nothing. Research from the University of Texas showed that women could sense testosterone-related cues in men through scent alone, even without direct interaction. Another study found that over 90% of first impression impact comes from nonverbal communication. And do you know what that means? Most men are losing the attraction game without even realizing they are playing. They try to convince with words, with gifts, with compliments. While their body has already revealed the truth, they are acting from need. This part is critical. You cannot control body language long-term. If your inner structure is weak, your body will eventually expose it. And this is not a punishment. It is an invitation, because body language is not a trick to fake value. It is a mirror of your inner state. Fix the inner state, and the body adjusts automatically. Machiavelli said it clearly. Appearance is everything. But he was not talking about superficial looks. He was talking about the art of communicating without explaining yourself. The presence you project before you speak can make you compelling or completely invisible. She does not need to understand what you feel. She only needs to feel something when you are near. Nearness. And that feeling is created through tension, presence, pauses, and the ability to hold eye contact without rushing, without discomfort, without collapse. Many men fail at this point because they confuse body language with performance. They practice poses, they rehearse lines, they imitate behaviors, but the body cannot hold a mask for long. Pressure exposes it. Artificial signals break down because what truly matters is not what you do, but the place you act from. That inner place is everything. If your energy is born from the fear of not being liked, your body reveals it. If your energy is born from the certainty that you are valuable with or without her, that is felt as well. Imagine two men entering the same room. One walks in searching for attention, scanning the room, smiling to gain approval. The other walks in calm, unhurried, not seeking anything. One silently says, "Notice me, I'm here." The other simply exists. Which one do you think awakens more attraction? Here is the paradox. The more you try to create attraction through effort, the less value you project. Because attraction is not a response to intention, it is a response to energy, to inner stability. And if you have no center, if your presence says, "Please choose me," then no amount of talking will save you. You've already lost ground. That's why the hidden language of desire is not learned. It is cultivated. It is built through structure, discipline, and what you carry in silence. Because words can be ignored, but projection cannot be hidden. When a woman begins to sense that a man has lost value, her body reacts before her mind. She doesn't analyze it logically. She doesn't list pros and cons. She simply begins to disconnect. At first, it's subtle, almost invisible. But if you know how to read the signs, you'll see them. Her responses lose warmth. Messages become shorter, cooler. Her attention fragments. Her interest fades like a flame starved of oxygen. This does not mean she hates you. It doesn't even mean there is someone else. It means something more basic, more instinctive. She no longer perceives you as a high-value stimulus. And here is the most uncomfortable part. She doesn't fully understand why. If you ask her, she might say, "I don't feel the same anymore," or "I need space," or "something changed." But she cannot explain the biological signal her body has already processed. That signal does not respond to what you did yesterday. It responds to what you have been broadcasting unconsciously. Small behaviors, micro-reactions, approval-seeking disguised as kindness, lack of emotional leadership, poorly managed anxiety. When these signals accumulate, her limbic system activates a quiet alarm. He's not it anymore. Female response to low perceived value is not hostility, it is withdrawal, silent distance. Because desire doesn't shut off loudly, it cools through indifference. Machiavelli would say, "Contempt is not always spoken. Sometimes the absence of reaction is the strongest punishment." And that is exactly what happens here. She doesn't attack, she doesn't argue, she simply stops engaging. At this moment, most men panic. They try to repair it. They become more available, more attentive, more insistent. What they fail to understand is that every anxious gesture confirms the loss of value. She is not testing your patience. She is responding to your energy. And if your response is fear, neediness, or emotional pressure, you only reinforce what her instincts have already concluded. You are no longer the man she believed you were. This is where countless men collapse. They interpret silence as a communication issue, but it is not. It is a perception issue. And in the realm of desire, perception is everything. When a man projects low value, a woman does not feel the urge to invest. She doesn't feel tension. She doesn't feel pull. She doesn't feel fire. So her body begins to withdraw emotional investment. First attention, then interest, then intimacy, and finally, respect. And once respect fades, desire has already disappeared. Here is another hard truth. A woman can care about you without desiring you. She can value you as a person. She can even appreciate your loyalty. But if she no longer perceives you as a biologically grounded, self-directed man, attraction will not return. This damages the male ego deeply. Because you ask, how can she disconnect when I was present, when I treated her well, when I gave everything? Here is the answer. Desire does not respond to effort. It responds to signals. And if those signals communicate dependence, lack of direction, or constant need for validation, her limbic system stops registering you as a leader and starts registering you as emotional weight. Machiavelli would summarize it like this. A ruler who depends on love before establishing respect will not endure. Translated into attraction, the moment you depend on her choosing you, you surrender power. And when power disappears, attraction follows. You are no longer acting from your center, you are acting from fear. And a woman, at a biological level, cannot feel desire for a man she perceives as operating beneath her level of inner power. She may feel sympathy, she may stay longer out of habit, comfort, or guilt, but desire, that internal fire, has faded. And you will not revive it with gifts, not with long messages, not with explanations, because desire does not respond to logic, it responds to energy. The tragedy is that many men, instead of retreating with dignity, insist. They push, they over-explain, until they become invisible, and that invisibility destroys them. Because when desire is gone and you remain, asking for attention, you bury your own value right in front of her eyes. The real answer is silence. Not empty silence, but grounded silence. Silence with structure. Silence with direction. Becoming a man who does not need to be chosen because he has already chosen himself. Only from that position can power be restored. Only from there can her body ever perceive you as an option again. Because desire is not born from kindness, it is born from respect. And respect is born from power. Not power over her, but power over yourself. Recovering value in the eyes of a woman who no longer desires you is not a task for the weak. It is not a tactic to win her back. It is a quiet battle to reclaim something far more important, your center. Because what you truly lost was not her. What you lost was the perception of strength you once projected, and that, however painful, can be rebuilt. But never through pleading, only through internal reconstruction. Most men want to be desired again without transforming. They hope nostalgia will change her mind, but attraction does not function that way. Desire does not return through memories. It returns through new perception, and perception is not created with speeches or promises. It is created with visible reality, with presence. Pause. With change so deep you never need to announce it, because when change is real, it speaks without words. Machiavelli would have said, "Lost power is only recovered through a strategic demonstration of superiority." In relationships, that superiority is never over her. It is over yourself. Here is the key. Do not try to make her see you as you once were. Become a man she has never encountered before. Because she does not need to remember the past version of you. She needs to experience a version that is impossible to overlook today. To do that, you must cut the reaction cycle. Stop reaching out. Stop explaining. Stop treating her validation as oxygen. Because as long as she feels you orbit her attention, desire remains dormant. Silence here is not indifference. It is strategy, and that silence must be full of action, full of discipline, full of forward movement. Silent stagnation is waiting. Silent evolution is power forming. Rebuilding value begins when you become a man who does not need to be loved to feel worthy. Because true attraction is not born from the need to be accepted, it is born from certainty in your own direction. So what does that transformation look like? It begins with the physical, a strong body, upright posture, high vital energy. Not for appearance, but because the body is the first language of strength. A fragile body signals vulnerability. A solid body signals authority. Then the emotional, cutting dependency, ending reactive behavior. Not chasing highs and lows, learning to hold uncertainty without collapsing. That is pure magnetism. Then the psychological, a purpose larger than her, a mission that does not shift with external approval. When a man has direction, value follows naturally, because masculine energy is not defined by what it conquers, but by what it sustains. The biggest mistake? Thinking self-improvement is a tactic to get her back. Number. Self-improvement is insurance against ever losing yourself again. If she returns, she should not find the same man waiting. She should encounter an energy that does not need her attention, yet draws it naturally, not through manipulation, through real transformation. And if she never returns, it no longer matters, because rebuilding value was never for her. It was always for you. So you never again emotionally kneel before anyone, so rejection never collapses you. Machiavelli would explain it this way. A leader should not seek to be liked, but to be respected by presence. In desire, that means this. You do not need to be loved first. You need to be perceived as unshakable. Unshakable does not mean cold. It means internally structured. Someone who feels pain but does not break, who acknowledges rejection without turning it into damage, who converts pressure into fuel. Because when a man rebuilds himself through adversity, he does not return as the same man. He returns as someone who does not need to return at all. And that is compelling. You never need to display your growth. You only need to sustain it. Consistency. Visible progress. Strategic detachment. These create an energy that cannot be ignored. And if one day she comes back, you will not greet her with anxiety. You will greet her with calm. Because you are no longer waiting. You are choosing. And if she does not meet your new standard, she is no longer an option. That is the real comeback. Not the man who seeks approval, but the man who became the source of his own value. True power is not in what you say. It is in what you project without speaking. This is not about techniques, not lines, not psychological tricks. It is about becoming someone whose presence communicates value instantly, because the strongest signals are not seen. They are felt. Your posture, your energy, your silence, your decisions. Everything communicates. And even if she cannot explain it, she senses it immediately. She is not looking for logic. She is responding to presence. A man who does not depend on approval, who does not beg, convince, or compete. A man who chose himself first. That is not performed. It is built, day by day, in private discipline, in how you speak to yourself, in how you carry rejection. Desire is not born from perfection. It is born from alignment, from a man who transformed his wounds into strength. Machiavelli would say, "He who controls perception rules without speaking." Applied to desire, it means this. When you control what you project, you never need to ask for what you deserve. So here is the conclusion. You do not need more tactics. You need more presence, more direction, more internal fire, because desire is not requested. It is provoked, and respect is not begged for. It is established through energy. Remember this. What you emit without speaking determines whether you are desired or ignored. Subscribe if you want to learn more about power, presence, and the hidden dynamics of attraction. Share this with someone who needs to wake up. And remember, you do not need to be perfect. You only need to be impossible to ignore.